In this video, I'm going to be philosophizing on freedoms, morality, and ethics. When it comes to understanding freedoms, there's a responsibility we owe to ourselves, which we are responsible for responsbilidades. Intrinsico, pertena, específico, subjectivo-objectivo relaçãonavios, algo conduz psicológico, verdade, válido e processos de absurdities that validate the meaningfulness intrinsic to bounds in regards to our own self-conducts, in which we have a conscience process way in regards to direct perception of the self that direct and indirect meaning interpretations are associated with ways and calibratory thoughts in regards to our meaningful emotions, how we feel, and how our specific self-conducts in association with perception, action, behavior, not just currently, but forward-looking into the future, influence us through our responsibility owed to the self, how we feel in regards to that responsibility, and prior existing actions as well as current actions as we weigh and calibrate various ops within our direct perception that is associated with moral concern as well as ethical concern. But preliminarily, moral concern, which is subjective, not so much the ethical part, which pertains to the psychological truths of existence, which we'll discuss in another video more in depth. But in this video, I'm going to be more discussing and prioritizing morality, which is subjective and which allows us to develop more objective moral reasoning that is bound to the self as we, and only in regards to the responsbilidades that we uptake and which we are responsible for, and which can develop a healthier, psychologically functioning process in regards to meaningfulness, in which the moral principle of psychological pertains in regards to our capacity to infer meaningful information in regards to subjectivo-objectivo relationships, in which we predict certain feelie-wheelies and meanings in association with those feelie-wheelies that self-conducts, perception, action, behaviors, direct and indirect, have a meaningful influence on and with regards, and will most likely, probabilistically, as we engage that moral prediction process, which we're engaging future-oriented processes of conscience, not consciousness, but conscience. That process which requires us to, often it's imagined as having an angel on one side and a demon or the devil on the other side, whispering on each ear, having the individual who's weighing thoughts in regards to what they should do, and not just what they should do, the good and bad elements of those that have certain valences of morality that are subjective. And those moral valences are associated with self-virtues and not so much what's truly good or bad, or good and evil, or concepts and perceptions and such, but rather how we feel about our own perceptions, actions, and behavior in relation to certain bounds of existing, not just bounds of existing that pertain direct to the self, but which pertain also indirect to the self in association when we, say, observe another who's meaningfully similar, not some individual who's meaninglessly similar or even meaninglessly different, arbitrary and absurdities, because there's often times where we can even see another person who in one instantive is being acted against with what is to another considered immoral perception, action, and behavior, and particularly self-conduct. And maybe they experience what to another is deemed as unnecessary suffering, but to you may judge this individual as having deserved it, or not even considering that and more just finding it amusing, perhaps. Somebody being attacked for what's seemingly no reason, but which you don't know, and you might think, well, maybe there is a reason for that, and I don't know what it is, and don't care about it, and that was pretty funny. So it doesn't really weigh on your conscience. But to another individual, it might, especially probably the person attacking them who's decided that it was within their own moral perception to be able to do so. And when we evaluate certain moral concerns that cross through our conscience, there's a weighing and calibratory thought process to that, in which we're looking at specific component parts and processes and evaluating the contingencies within our perception, in which we can engage livre agência and our self-conducts, and which we hold ourself accountable for. Not so much accountable, in fact, not at all accountable, but more responsible for. Because it's not so much about what we have done, but more about what we can do and what we should have done and what develops meaning and rather than does it, and contributes to feelings of meaninglessness, arbitrariness, and the absurdities that are pathetic and don't actually have a meaningfully influential, direct or indirect, near and far influence on conscience, and which often breeds resentment. Juxtaposed to responsibility, developing meaning, reducing meaninglessness, arbitrariness, and absurdities that pertain direct to our feelie-wheelies and meaningfulness processes, in which we are more considerate and which weighs on conscience, rather than aimlessly walking around trying to figure out why that is wrong, rather than, well, I don't want to be punished in the future. I don't want to be held accountable again. And that was bad, so I guess I don't know necessarily the reason for it because I haven't engaged that responsibility to internalize that individualized process that's enlightening. Because it's an external, extrinsic motivation that's less motivating and less meaningful and less meaningfully influential to our psychological needs for conscience and to develop morality effectively and meaningfully. Whereas uptaking responsibility does a lot more to develop those conscience processes and the consciousness of an individual who is conscious of that in their direct perceptions as they weigh particular thoughts in regards to what they deem rather than what seems to be moral and ethical, and which establishes specific subjectivo-objectivo relationships that are actual factual rather than merely perceived, and which are validated internally as valid, psychologically true and meaningful only in regards to the development of meaningful emotions and the meaningful emotions and feelie-wheelies that are operating as those highest organization of organizing meaningful information into higher order cognition are being evaluated and weighed in regards to more complex opting processes of what we should do as an individual. Not so much as what another should do, though that can also sometimes pertain to conscience in regards to more how we think about morality in regards to ourself, in relation always to the self. And that's where I'm going to leave off for this video. I'm going to discuss this in upcoming videos moving forward and keep on developing those meaningfulnesses. Have an awesome one.